Hundreds of people reported strange lights over northern Brazil. Commercial airline pilots began reporting the same objects. Air traffic controllers claimed they were watching the same objects on radar. Quickly, the Brazilian Air Force launched a military operation to investigate. What were these people seeing? Why did the military quickly make this an official case? My friends, you're going to like this one. In the summer of 1977, residents along Brazil's northern coastline began describing unusual lights appearing over villages after dark. At first, the reports sounded familiar. Bright objects hovered silently, moved in unusual ways, and often disappeared before anyone could get close enough to identify them. Strange lights in the night sky weren't exactly unheard of, and many assumed the sightings would eventually stop. They didn't. Night after night, more people came forward with remarkably similar accounts. Witnesses claimed glowing objects approached homes, fields, and fishing boats before suddenly accelerating away. Some described beams of light shining toward the ground, while others insisted the objects appeared to react when people tried to approach them. Whether every report was accurate was impossible to know, but one thing was difficult to ignore. The number of sightings kept growing, and then something happened that changed the investigation completely. Local authorities were receiving so many reports that the Brazilian Air Force decided the sightings could no longer be dismissed as isolated stories. Instead of closing the file, they opened a new one. The operation received an official name: Operação Prato, or Operation Saucer. Military investigators were now being sent into the region, not to explain the sightings after they happened, but to observe them as they occurred. That decision transformed the case. It was no longer just a collection of eyewitness accounts. Military personnel established observation posts, interviewed witnesses, photographed unusual lights, and documented what they saw in detailed reports. Unlike many famous UFO stories that rely almost entirely on memories told years later, Operation Saucer began producing official records while the events were still unfolding. The investigation was led by Captain Hollander, an experienced Brazilian Air Force officer. His assignment wasn't to prove extraterrestrial visitors existed. It was to determine what people were actually seeing and whether those reports posed any threat. Hollander and his team approached the case like investigators, collecting statements, recording dates and locations, and comparing accounts from witnesses who had never met one another. For weeks, the reports continued. Some nights passed quietly, others produced multiple sightings within only a few hours. Military investigators claimed they photographed unusual lights on several occasions, while witnesses continued describing objects moving in ways they couldn't explain. Whatever was happening over northern Brazil wasn't ending. Then the investigation took another unexpected turn. Up to this point, nearly every report had come from people on the ground. Fishermen, farmers, families. But now the sightings were beginning to move into controlled airspace. Commercial airline pilots started reporting unusual objects while in flight, describing lights that maneuvered in ways unlike conventional aircraft. These weren't casual observers looking into the night sky, they were professionals trained to recognize aircraft, weather phenomena, and navigation hazards. The reports kept coming, and they didn't stop with pilots. According to multiple accounts, air traffic controllers monitoring the region also detected unidentified targets on radar around the same time pilots were reporting visual contact. Suddenly, investigators had something they hadn't possessed before: independent observations from the air and electronic data from the ground. The case was no longer resting on eyewitness testimony alone. But then something happened that raised an even bigger question. Military aircraft were reportedly sent to intercept some of the objects. Pilots attempted to close the distance, but according to later accounts, the unidentified objects accelerated away before they could be reached. Some reports claim speeds approaching 30,000 kilometers per hour, far beyond the capabilities of conventional aircraft of the era. Whether those estimates were accurate remains debated, but they became one of the most astonishing claims associated with Operation Saucer. The question was no longer whether people were reporting strange lights over northern Brazil. The question had become, what was the Brazilian Air Force trying to catch? Military pilots were now pursuing objects they couldn't identify, while investigators continued collecting reports from across northern Brazil. But as Operation Saucer expanded, another mystery began to emerge. The Air Force wasn't simply responding to sightings anymore. It was beginning to assemble one of the most unusual case files in Brazilian history. Captain Uirangue Hollander and his team spent months interviewing witnesses, documenting locations, and photographing unexplained lights. According to later accounts, the investigators compiled hundreds of pages of reports along with sketches, photographs, and observations recorded while the events were still unfolding. Whatever conclusions they reached remained classified for years, but the investigation itself left behind something far more important: a paper trail. And then something changed the investigation again. Until now, most of the evidence had consisted of eyewitness testimony supported by military observations. But reports began describing physical effects that investigators couldn't easily dismiss. Some witnesses claimed beams of light had passed over them, leaving burns, weakness, dizziness, or unusual puncture marks on their skin. The incidents became so common in parts of the region that local residents gave the phenomenon a name: Chupa Chupa, or the sucker, referring to the mysterious lights people believed were draining their energy. Whether those injuries were connected to the lights has never been established. Medical explanations, environmental factors, and misidentifications have all been proposed over the years. But from an investigative standpoint, something important had happened. The case was no longer limited to objects in the sky. Investigators were now documenting reports involving direct encounters with people on the ground. That shift raised an entirely new question. If the lights were only distant aerial phenomena, why were witnesses describing close-range encounters with remarkably similar details? Fishermen, farmers, and families living miles apart often reported bright objects hovering silently before projecting narrow beams of light toward the ground. Not every account matched perfectly, but enough similarities appeared that military investigators continued documenting them rather than dismissing them outright. Then the investigation took another unexpected turn. Years after Operation Saucer officially ended, Captain Hollander broke his silence. In a series of interviews, he spoke publicly about the investigation and described incidents that he believed remained unexplained. He never claimed to know what the objects were. Instead, he argued that something real had occurred over northern Brazil, something he believed deserved serious scientific investigation rather than ridicule. His interviews reignited public interest in a case many people had nearly forgotten. Then, in the early 2000s, another discovery changed the conversation once again. After years of requests from researchers and journalists, the Brazilian government began releasing portions of Operation Saucer's files. Hundreds of pages of military documents became available, including reports, diagrams, witness interviews, and photographs collected during the investigation. For the first time, people outside the military could examine much of the same material investigators had reviewed decades earlier. The released documents answered one question almost immediately. Operation Saucer was real. The Brazilian Air Force had indeed launched an official investigation, assigned personnel, gathered evidence, and documented the events. That much was no longer in dispute, but the files created an even bigger mystery. They confirmed that the investigation happened. They didn't explain what investigators were actually chasing. Some researchers believe the documents point toward an unusual combination of atmospheric phenomena, misidentified aircraft, and the natural tendency for extraordinary stories to spread through isolated communities. Others argue the consistency of the reports, the involvement of trained military observers, and the volume of official documentation suggests something genuinely unexplained occurred over northern Brazil in 1977. More than 4 decades later, there is still no consensus. The investigation is over. The files have been released. The witnesses have spoken. But the mystery remains.